Okay, so we are still in identification, but now we want to go into problem identification and prioritization, and we want to refine our success definition. So our problem identification and prioritization, the mindset is we want to find and prioritize the most important problems to solve. What is the problem space that my target audience faces? How do I prioritize the most important problems to focus on? And then the pitfalls, problems are too high level. The problems don't apply to your target audience, and the problems that tie to a much smaller portion of your audience. I'm going to give a little pro tip here. As I said beforehand, I told you this is going to come. Good segmentation, good problems, good solutions. I can tell you a story at this point, but we're already an hour in. But I can tell you that in my first round of Meta, I kind of screwed up my prioritization. I realized it a bit too late into the interview. The interviewer wasn't very nice to me. I lost my confidence and I ran to the bathroom and cried. I still passed the interview somehow. So you can always take it that, step by step things happen, and trust the process, and you don't need to be perfect in every step of the way. Okay, I already said that good segmentation, good problems, good solutions. Okay, common problem mapping approaches. User journey approach. What are the steps and touch points that a user needs to accomplish, that a user needs to take to accomplish their goals? What are the gaps and opportunities in that journey? And then there is the pain point analysis. What are the key pain points that the user faces, and the jobs to be done, which is what are the key jobs that the user is hiring you for? I will say that the user journey approach from a MECE standpoint, it's probably the safest to be like step by step. I think it's the one that makes it the comprehensive section is probably you're already mapping an existing, so I think it's a bit limiting. I personally like the pain point analysis, but one thing I'll say is there isn't a perfect way to map problems. And in my opinion, it's really hard to get them MECE for the ex-consultants in the room. But if you already did MECE beforehand with your users, then maybe it's okay that you're not MECE with your problems, because the interview already checked off that that signal, right? You don't need to apply, you don't need to constantly do it. So I'm just saying, like, user journey approach is probably going to be the most structured. I think it's probably the least comprehensive. The pain points, it's really hard to know that you identified all of the pain points and all of the jobs to be done, but you take an 80-20 approach and you hope that the 3-4 problems that you have jotted line in the 5 to 7 minutes that you have for this are good enough, right? It's also a reminder, we only have 30 minutes here, so let's not obsess over getting it perfect. Okay, so I want you to think about problems identification. I'm going to give you 2 minutes again to think about them. Try answering it. Know that when I go to my solution for the problems, I'm giving more problems than I should have, so I can show you some things. So just think about 2-3 problems that you think are interesting for this audience. I'll also say, people, if you got the email from me with the survey and everything, don't touch it yet. We will get to it just before the debrief. So just focus on the content right now. Okay. So I'm going to give you my approach, not very perfect for healthcare problems for new patients with little, for new parents, sorry, with little support. So number one, I am overwhelmed with my parenting experience and need support for myself. Number two, I want to find a trusted provider who connects well with both me and my child. Number three, I want to be able to access or schedule touch points to fit my unpredictable newborn routine. Number four, I want clear guidance on my child's health milestones and medical requirements. I'm not 100% sure that this is comprehensive. I think it's mutually exclusive enough. And I will also say that I think that the area here in gray, if you came to me in an interview and told me these are the three problems and separated this into three problems, I would be fine with it into three separate problems, because I think this is the crux for it, especially. So I gave you these two also because I wanted to show you a more comprehensive approach, right? In my opinion, this one is the most aligned with the needs and the strategic alignment with Yelp's mission. If you remember in the beginning, we want to tie the problems that we choose to solve that are aligned with the strategic direction of the company, right? Finding a trusted provider is pretty much what Yelp does. The connection well for me and my baby and my child is like my own problem that I'm looking to solve, okay? And this can come to location, reputation, insurance, connection, culture, specialization, all of these things, okay? Another cat came to say hi. Okay, so actually, I want to see if there are any questions on the problems I came up with before I move to the next section, or any other questions about this section as well. I'm not sure if I lost you guys, if you just gave up on me.
Nope, still here. No questions.
Okay. Oh, there we go, Joseph.
Just kidding. There's a question.
There we go, Joseph. Whoops, you're muted.
There are some questions in chat that people have asked.
I can't see my. So one thing I'm really bad at is sharing my screen. I'm very honest. How do you conduct an effective pain point analysis? That's a great question. I think user journey mapping is one. I try to think about what would the user might experience. I don't like, this is what I'm saying when I'm saying here, whoops. Sorry, guys. Where was I? You guys get to see how many slides there are. Wait, this isn't the right one. Oh, it does work to go back. So these are the three ways that I think are pretty good ways to approach identifying the user journey. So user journey is one.
Actually, yes. Rachel, I was the one who put the question. This is Gladys.
Hey, Gladys. It's so good to see you.
Indeed. I was thinking of the pain point analysis because it all depends on like who is coming up with them. Like often between engineering and PMs, there's quite some friction sometimes about like, is it really a pain point? Like how deep is it? How do you measure, right? So based on the mapping of the journey, how painful is one thing, and then how much friction does it add to the full journey? And why should we focus on it? So I think it was more like how do we quantify and effectively communicate with different stakeholders why a specific problem or pain point is one to go after.
Yeah, so I think strategic alignment is one way to do it. And I think prioritization, you can use the same prioritization approach as I said beforehand. But I think to your point, it's really true. So if you're thinking about a user journey approach, for example, for an existing product, you can identify where your drop-offs are. And that can be a pretty good way to say this is a big problem to solve, right? But, you know, for something like this that's relatively new, you're probably going to do user research, workshops, like that's how you validate it. And that's a very common interview question to have. So you can say, okay, I want to see what people are looking for. I want to see what trends are in the market by, you know, you can look at new parents magazines and what are they often talking about? What are they asking? What are the questions, right? These are the types of questions you have, and you make a hypothesis, right? So for me, I'm thinking about two things. I'm thinking about what problems out of this Yelp is equipped to solve, right?
Mhm.
So I think overwhelm, like that's probably something that would require digging into, and maybe it's not necessarily something that Yelp can directly solve. Finding a trustworthy provider that connects well with me and my child, that's the core thing that Yelp does, and then enumerating what that means and breaking this down a bit further. Like if you just told me this, is it the finding? Is it the trust? Is it the connection? Right? That goes to reviews. Is it me and my child, making sure that the reviews address maybe both me and my child? So I think there, it's a bit about understanding what the users are, user research, things like that. So you can find the information. And it's really hard in an interview setting. Like you have about 5 to 7 minutes to do this. So you need to have some assumptions. So here, what I'm saying is I'm prioritizing here in a way that's like needs-based and strategic alignment. Why? Because accessing and scheduling, every doctor probably you have a schedule now, right? Clear guidance on my health, on my child's health milestones and medical requirements, that's probably a pain point, but it's not one that, you know, Yelp is going to help you. So that's how I approach prioritizing here. Evelyn.
How strict are you using Misi in this? Because the first pain point you're talking about it, I could also see that applied to family who are experienced with like their childcare or whatever.
Yeah. So it's okay that a pain point applies outside of my target audience, right? Because if my pain points are too narrow and too specific just to this, and by the way, the second one that I have here is also something that could apply to other families with children, right? So it's okay that it applies to other ones, but it can't not at all apply to the audience I selected. Because if it applies to other ones as well, it actually says, oh, this might be an interesting direction to look at because it's a repeatable use case. But I don't want all of my pain points to be too general, right? And we could argue that all of these are pain points that tie to other, with, you know, with other children as well. But here we focused on those so we can try really thinking about what is, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a clueless parent who's doing it for the first time. I'm trying to put myself in their shoes and exhibit user empathy. This is where we're exhibiting user empathy, and it's okay if things aren't necessarily outside. But if I had a problem here, which is I don't know how my child is going to interact with my brother or with their brother or sister, well, if they're first-time parents, I'm not sure where that other brother or sister came from, right? That would be a misdirection, maybe. Or if I had a pain point here, I'm a doctor and I'm looking for new patients, I'm not sure this applies here. So that's how I'm thinking about Misiness here. Does that answer your question? Okay, let me try and see if I can bring up the chat. And Gladys, thank you so much for your question. Does my answer satisfy you?
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, so like, and I think tying it to the strategic alignment, I couldn't agree more, because you could come up with 100 problems, but if the one we're focusing on doesn't serve the organization or the company, you know, success becomes quite elusive there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that as an interviewer, if an interviewee came to me and told me I want to find a trusted provider who connects well with both me and my child as the problem, I would probably work with them to figure out that they actually have 3 separate problems here, right? And if that's the only problem that they gave me, I would probably be fine with it as well, because we would then work through the prioritization through it, right? I'm giving the other ones as well because I wanted to kind of show you the strategic alignment point, that it's okay to bring them. I wanted to help myself a bit here to give you something a bit broader, right? This isn't perfect, but I would be very okay if a candidate gave me this answer and we would work together to figure out that these are actually 3 separate questions, 3 separate problems that are actually comprehensive in terms of Yelp's strategic alignment. I would accept this, okay? But then I think it's a bit awkward that I'm judging my own performance here. So I don't know. Maybe somebody who's interviewing product managers, maybe Crossy can tell us what she thinks about the solution. But anyway, we can keep going. Okay, so we made it to the solution phase, guys. We're actually 20 minutes behind where I thought we would be. And I think when I scheduled this, I thought we would make it in an hour, but boy, was I wrong, which is fine. So solution brainstorm and prioritization. You want to find solutions that solve the problems that you're focused on, right? What are the solutions I can come up with? What should I prioritize? How do I test it? What do you want to avoid? Solutions that don't solve your problems, going too deep on a single solution that isn't your prioritized one, prioritizing solutions that aren't in line with mission or scope alignment. And then pro tips, I would try to think about 2 practical solutions and 1 moonshot idea. Different companies have different approach to the types of solutions that people bring. Meta, in my opinion, likes people to reuse existing assets that Meta has, and they consider that creative. Google, from my experience, seem to like the moonshot ideas and then focus on reducing their complexity. But you don't need to have the most creative idea out there. I think candidates are too hung up on how creative their solutions are. Because if you remember, we're evaluated on 5 things. Solutions are number 4 of these 5 things. It's not the least important thing. It's not the 4th most important, but it's 20% of what you're evaluated on, not 80%. And within that 20%, creativity is another percent. So don't worry too much about very creative solutions, okay? And if your ideal solution is very complicated or a moonshot idea, try thinking about how you would scope it down for validation. And if you want to prioritize it, and the interviewer will probably ask you how you would scope it down for validation as well. Okay? And then common oh, sorry, my slide making isn't great. I was copying and pasting a slide. This should be solution approaches. So common solution approaches. No wonder I didn't really like being a consultant. You want to have practical solutions and moonshot ideas. So practical solutions, what are assets that you can reuse, right? Tags, filters, badges. You know, if you're thinking about a marketplace for Meta, do you really need a new marketplace app, or can you add another tab to marketplace, right? Moonshot ideas can be new features. They can be innovative and new and forward-looking. In today's world, you can think about a dedicated LLM or an AI assistant. You can think about a VR suit. You can think about launching Yelp into space if you can make that claim, right? And these are solutions that are general. They're not specific to this problem. I'm just giving you ideas of how you can come up with solutions in real time, because at the end of the day, we're not trying to completely reinvent the wheel. Yeah, Gilad.
Sorry, I didn't want to stop you in the middle of the sentence. I was waiting.
No, go for it.
So
I tend to ramble, so it's good that you stopped me.
So just a question. We were talking about, like, here are several solutions, and you also you talked about how you align it to the company's mission.
Yes.
Do you think there's any relevance or impact to say that you're prioritizing a specific solution because you see there's more revenue options for the company from it?
So that's a great question. And I think revenue options for the customer, so I'm trying to find a good way to answer this. So what I was taught when I was interviewing for Meta, my mentors and guides told me, don't think too much about revenue at this point. Think about adding user value, and revenue will come later. So I think for growth-focused companies, a lot of the thought is how can you focus more on growing use cases? Because now, if you're building this for healthcare providers, it could be from Yelp's point of view, why do they want healthcare providers? Maybe they have large marketing spend And because a doctor appointment is worth $400 in insurance versus a $40 visit to the to your beautician to do your nails or something, then they can charge more in ads. So this is a great question. You can ask this in the beginning of how important is revenue at this point. You can ask this when you're setting the context. You can get a sense from the interviewer how much they care about revenue.
I like that, asking that in the beginning. And just a quick secondary question to that, do you think there's a difference between B2C and B2B with that aspect?
So trying to think about that. That's a great question. I think that the problem with B2B is in many cases their products are too specific. So they end up giving you B2C solutions to test your product sense skills. Like when I was doing the product sense interview question that I was using when I was at Datadog was, how would you build a referral program? Actually a referral program for Datadog, but it was still very consumer faced. Actually, for Arena, the product case interview for my own startup has a revenue component for it, so the users would actually need to identify it. So I think in B2B, maybe you trend a bit more towards revenue, but I don't have a very good answer. I think it depends on the context, and I think it's good to clarify with the interviewer. Because at the end of the day, companies want to gain revenue, but in many cases, especially in like companies like Meta or Google, or the Netflix of the world or Amazon, like revenue is a bit secondary, right? So I think so I think clarifying that with the interviewer, you can ask how important is revenue. But I think if you ask me why would Yelp want to enter this space, this could be part of my response, but it doesn't align necessarily just with the mission. But companies, Yelp doesn't exist as a charity organization. Yelp exists because it wants to make money. Ads is the main way it makes money, by booking, by taking that percentage. So healthcare is a pretty lucrative space to go in. And I think if you say that up front in your hypothesis, you can say it can add a significant revenue stream to its business. That's a great question. Ariana.
Thanks, Rachel. This has been great so far. I appreciate you taking our questions as we go. Piggybacking off of that, I noticed, you didn't tee up at the beginning, what does success look like?
I'm getting there.
Okay, great. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about when you start to answer that, and why didn't you tee it up at the very beginning? Because as you start going into solutioning, often I use those as a way to prioritize.
So my hypothesis is my success definition for now, because if I'm successful, this happens, right? So I am tying it up as I go. I'm just not applying metrics to it yet.
Okay, so you prefer to do the more granular definition at the end as opposed to upfront?
Because I guess I could do it upfront. I'm thinking the problem is when you do it upfront, the problem is still very vague. So if you're thinking about the hypothesis we had in the beginning, and thankfully my keyboard is working. Where's my baseline hypothesis? I lost it. Here, that was my initial hypothesis here, right? So expansion to healthcare, leveraging its consumer SMB trusted network, and effectively meet growing demands for transparency and trust in patient care despite facing challenges, right? So growing demands, I can tie this at this point. Is it going to be revenue, to Gilad's point? Is it going to be more daily active users? Is it going to be better retention? I'm not sure about it yet. I can ask the interviewer to see, like you can suggest ways to measure it. But when you launch a new feature, the ecosystem metrics usually lag after the specific feature, feature usage metrics, meaning that your feature being successful, if you're thinking about like an A/B test experiment, and maybe I'm getting a bit too nitty into the weeds, but maybe the percent of users that are placing an order for a healthcare provider will be higher for your test group versus control. because you already have healthcare providers on the platform, right? So the percent of users that make with whatever you launch might be higher, but that might not show yet top line gains for Yelp's retention overall. So the problem overall needs to be tied to Yelp's mission and vision. But the metrics themselves, I want to define once I decide on how I want to measure this. I'll give you an example. Trying to give you another example. And you won't always use A/B tests. Sometimes you'll use network tests. So I think that it's a great question. You could try doing it up front and say, these are the metrics I think I'm going to impact, or this is the impact I expect to see, and then go on and refining it. But the goal is that by the end of the interview, you should say it. I like putting hypotheses, and then I voice over the hypotheses with how I plan to measure it. So yeah, you're not, I think that you're right. You could do it earlier, but I also think that it's really hard to fully define success, because that's pretty much the goal of this, is like to scope this down into something that you can execute on and measure success of. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was more curious about if there was a reason or a strong feeling as to why you should not do it that way, because
I haven't fully defined the problem yet.
Yeah.
For me, it's because I haven't yet fully defined the problem. And in an interview setting, I actually tell the interviewer, hey, because in the circles method, they kind of train you to start with the goals and the measurement. But I actually find that without fully understanding the problem, it's premature. So I would want to, at the point here, if I'm successful, then more people will find providers who connect, like more people will use that booking for this use case, but I also have a specific audience here that I'm looking at, right? So, and I haven't gotten to this level of granularity 20 minutes ago when I started the interview, or an hour and 20 minutes ago in our case. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so what do you want to avoid? Solutions that don't solve your problem. Oh, we already spoke about this. We spoke about this. Did I give you guys 2 minutes to think about solutions? And I don't know why this is the wrong slide, but excuse me, I'll fix it before I send you the slides afterwards. And Ariana, if you don't have a question, just remove your hand. But now I want you guys to think about a few solutions. Let's maybe take 2 minutes to think about solutions. One more thing I would add, Ariana, to your point here. I like telling the interviewer upfront what my approach is going to be. So I like telling the interviewer, giving them a roadmap, which is my 3-step problem. I'm going to understand the context. I want to understand how it aligns with the mission and vision. I want to segment the users and prioritize, identify the problems, and then refine the success definition, which is the hypothesis I gave. Then I want to brainstorm the solutions and prioritize, and then I want to tell you how I measure success, right? So when I give them this framework, if that framework doesn't align, if I give them this approach and that framework doesn't align with their state of mind, the interviewer can also tell me, hey, I would like you to think about your success criteria earlier and not towards the end. And then I can say, okay, I can do that. But by doing this, I already, like, if you're thinking about this, is also top-down communication, right? Because I'm showing the interviewer how I'm slicing the pie of the interview. So the interviewer knows, and each step I tell them where we are in the process. So each step, the interviewer knows that I'm not leaving it out intentionally. That it's not that I forgot it, that I'm just like, this is my approach of how I want to do this. And if they want me to do something differently, they will tell me. So that's another thing I want to add here. Okay.
Thanks.
And there isn't one right way to do it. I've seen many candidates who tried giving me the metrics and all of that early in the interview, and they fumbled on it so much. They were struggling. They almost treated it like a product execution interview, and then they wasted a lot of time and they didn't get to the other good things. So that's partly why I kind of like taking it and like scoping down and getting to a point where I can actually define what it looks like and what success looks like. Great question. Okay, Feel like soon I'll need to get like support for us in terms of this time, but that's good. Okay, so I want you to think about your solutions. I want to fix my slide as well. So I'll give you another minute to think about it because we had a little bit of a chit chat here. Oh, this doesn't look good. Yeah, I'm definitely not good with these slides. I'm going to give us one more minute and then we'll go into solutions. Okay, so the problem I prioritized was I want to find a trusted provider who connects well with both me and my child. I'm giving a few, like my main solutions here that I identified. You can then tell me which ones are the moonshot, which are the practical ones. AI assistant can train an LLM that's specific to common problem situations that parents face that can help direct them to the right healthcare provider. You can have a dedicated tab, add a dedicated tab in Yelp for healthcare. Within that tab, specify providers. You can add tags for easy identification with relevant keywords attributes. You can filter based on insurance, specialty, common reviews, language, culture, which are the same things that I mentioned a few slides ago that are some of the things that they're thinking about. For trust, I can think about verified reviews, trust score based on verified legal sources around medical and safety malpractice, and then connects well with me and my child. I can think about personalized recommendation badge based on audience similarity. These are actually, and then specific questions on reviews that, this is actually two separate solutions as well. Specific questions on reviews that tie to the experience of both the parent and the child to populate the tags. This is what I came up with. I'm sure there are better solutions or different solutions, but I wanted to show you different approaches, things that are easier, things that are harder. We have a few moonshots here. We have a few risky ones. Any questions on the solutions?
Would you ask or somehow identify up front whether, you know, you talked about Google wanting moonshot and Meta wanting to use something that's pre-existing. Like, would you ask how much they're interested in a net new product? Yeah.
So usually the way you ask it is in the how much time do I have? If they tell you 6 months, you need to reuse. If they tell you 5 years unlimited resources, it's going to be a moonshot.
Do whatever you want. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
That's part of the questions I want to get up front. And they're in the slides, trust me. We've been spending too much time together. Not that, no, this is great, but this will be, very much. And this is where, here's another thing. If my interviewer told me in the beginning that they wanted me to validate this in 6 months, and I tell them that I want to train an LLM for this, I mean, training LLMs isn't that hard, but for this specific use case, I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Sure. So I would probably, are you sure this is what you want to do? How would you simplify this a bit, right? Because LLMs hallucinate and there's probably some HIPAA issues and probably like a million reasons why it would probably take you longer. And maybe verified reviews will be a better one, right? Cool. So let's go into, I'm going to prioritize the dedicated tab, and in the next, and the consultants or ex-consultants in the room will excuse me because my slide is very ugly and I wasn't able to do it step by step. We have our rice as much as I could, okay? So reach, impact, confidence, effort. I wanted to go these one by one, and I want us to go through these one by one. So AI assistant, via chatbot and in the app. I think it will have a medium reach because maybe people aren't used to using it yet. I think it will have high impact because, I stopped using Google since ChatGPT came. I'm not building for myself, but maybe it's easy for people to use relative to searching. My confidence is medium because, it can hallucinate. And I think the effort is high to the point I made earlier. You need to train it. You need to have the clean data sets. You need to have some AI ML expertise, even though for some use cases, LLMs are very easy to train. But I think for a platform like Yelp, it's probably going to be a bit more effort to get all of their data, identify the right things, and especially around managing the hallucination point, which for this use case can be detrimental, right? The dedicated tab, I think the reach will be high because Yelp already has all of these tabs. And my assumption here is that users know how to reach them. I think the impact is high because if many users, my hidden assumption is that many users use it. So if I put in a healthcare tab or a parents tab or something like this, they will know to get there. My confidence is pretty high because otherwise, why would Yelp add all of these tabs to begin with? And the effort is pretty low. My assumption is you just need to make sure the data is categorized well enough and you already have the design assets for it. On trust, verified reviews, I think here the reach might be low because at that point they are already looking at the listings and the listings already have reviews that are verified. So I think the reach might be low. The impact, I don't know how much parents will understand a verified review versus a regular review. So my confidence here is a bit medium. I could also argue it's low. My effort is medium, and I could be convinced that it's high as well because I need to have these reviewers. I need to identify, would actually probably call this a high effort. I need to identify the trusted reviewers. I need to collect them. And if they haven't found them, then it's a bit of a chicken and an egg, right? The trust score based on verified legal sources around medical or safety malpractice, I think the reach is probably high. I think the impact can be high, but I think people want more than just knowing that there's no malpractice lawsuits. My confidence might be medium, and then I think the effort is high because you need to connect to all of these external data systems that Yelp doesn't do already, and each state has its own registry for these things probably, so it might not be as good or it's not easy, but Yelp does have food ratings on it. I was looking at, does Yelp do something like this? It does have the ABC. I don't know if places outside of New York have that, but you can see if a restaurant is that. So, but still, my assumption is the effort is high because you need to connect to these legal databases, and maybe it's not that easy. Also, I might be wrong in my assumptions. And then connects well with me and my child, personalized recommendation badges, and asking specific questions that take both of the parent and the child to populate these tags or badges. So I think the reach is low. I need to be able, again, it's like on the specific thing, it's a bit more, I need to have those reviews. The impact is probably, I would say probably medium to high. It gives that peace of mind. My confidence is medium, and I think my effort is high, especially if I want to have an ML audience similarity that tells you like you, or collecting more questions than maybe you would on a review to make sure that you're able to address both of your experience and your child experience. So this is what I came up with. Questions on the rice here, because this is where I went really into details on the rice. I might be a lenient interviewer because if the candidates give me a good enough answer for prioritization in the previous steps, the place where I, without going in too much details with them, I usually go in very detail on the solution space because I want to see how they think about reach, impact, confidence, and effort. I actually do like them. Maybe not, maybe ICE, sometimes it's okay. ICE, not just rice, like the impact, confidence, effort, that's fine as well. But that's where I usually really drill candidates on, especially on the effort piece and the assumptions that they put into that. Questions? Joseph.
So in an actual interview, do you typically expect the candidates to draw out the matrix and do this high, medium, low for every single dimension, for every single solution?
Well, first of all, at this point, I would want them to, but I would expect them to have fewer solutions. I would expect them to have 2 to 3. I have more here. I mentioned this earlier. I have more because I want to show you more things. In a real interview, I will probably get to like, this is a solution. This is a solution. I actually forgot, I think, to put one of the rices here because I thought these were the same things. It took me like a few days to prepare this. So I probably left out. So there are probably 6 solutions. It's really hard to get to 6 solutions in one interview, right? So probably 2, 3 interviews, 2, 3 solutions, and then you go deep. And sometimes the interviewer wants you to do a wireframe of what it looks like, right? So you don't have that much time, but I would want them to show me how they're prioritizing once against the other in a similar thread. And usually this is where I nitpick on it. Because this is where you're putting a lot of cost into it as well. And especially if they haven't convinced me of prioritization in earlier steps, because essentially what I'm doing as an interviewer, I'm trying to collect signals. So if I see by this point that the candidate hasn't given me enough signal on their ability to prioritize, I will ask them to go very detailed on the prioritization with me. I won't want something hand-wavy because at that point, prioritization is one of the most important things that you have in this interview, right? So you have different ones, but at the point that you want to put engineering hours into this, I want to make sure that you will explain it. Now, some people will tell me, training an LLM, you can do it like this, and it's actually very easy. And, even though I'm working in AI and, I can argue it's easy as well, I can understand why a platform like Yelp is hard. I'm fine with the candidate telling me an answer that I disagree with, but they have a solid logic behind it. So if they say, I read online that you can, you only need 10 samples to retrain an LLM, and I'll be, okay, then it's low effort. Okay. Does that answer your question, Joseph?
Yeah, it does. I have one quick follow-up. So one concern in this section is that it takes a long time to build a matrix of evaluations.
You just do, I wouldn't build a full one. I would just do RICE, and I would do like 1 to 3. On each of them, I would just give it 1, 2, 3, and then I would just, the reason, by the way, also, I messed it up on the trust section, but I used different colors because you want here, if the reach is medium, it gets 2 points. If the impact is high, it gets 3 points. If the medium is, 2 points, right? So it's 2 plus 3 plus 2. That equals 8.
No.
It's late in New York. And then effort is high. So I'd subtract 3. So this gets a 5. It doesn't take you that much time.
Okay, cool, thanks.
But that's how I would do it. The reason why these are in light colors and these are in red colors is because I would add 1 plus 2 plus 3 and deduct this. So the fact that here this remains turquoise is not great because I want to notify that when it's high effort, I want to deduct points. Abby. I think maybe we lost Abby. Abby, can you hear us? Okay, if Abby has a question, she'll ask it later. Okay, so I'm tying up with my hypothesis again. By creating a dedicated tab, new parents will be able to find a trusted provider who connects well both with them and their child, because that was the problem I prioritized, right? Okay, I want to go into success validation. The mindset here is there isn't a perfect solution. You want to communicate succinctly how you would validate success, meaning how you would measure it. How do you measure that this feature is successful? How do you measure that your feature is helping the broader ecosystem? Important things to note. Sometimes you don't have time to fully get to this point. That's fine, because my assumption, this isn't a product execution interview, and your hypotheses, especially if you voice over how you measure it, it's fine. And you most likely don't have time to do a full diagnostic framework because that's like 20 minutes of a product execution interview. I would want you to state a brief metric of usage for overall success and respond to the feedback. If you're worried that you don't get to this point and you see that on the time frame that you have in terms of time management, you won't be able to get to this point soon enough. You can also do it earlier. I think at the point that you've identified your audience and you've identified your problem, at that point, you can probably already create that metric that you're going to evaluate on. That's probably even better for the RICE framework. Okay, so you can probably bring this earlier if you want to. Again, this is an approach. This isn't a perfect one. You can put this a bit earlier and then use that impact to prioritize your solutions. Any questions on this? Okay, I'm going to show you what I did for the example. I want to think about awareness. This is a new feature. I want to think about the number of users using the dedicated tab in comparison to other tabs that we launched. I want to think about conversion, the number of DAUs booking an appointment through the tab, NPS, the user feedback on Yelp. These are like more higher level things. So these two things are more for Yelp, and then Yelp network health is probably going to be retention rate, right? Now, if I put this in an A/B test, I would want to see, if I put this in an A/B test, I would probably want to see percentages on then the DAU using the dedicated tabs. I can't do it in an A/B test. Be careful when you say the words A/B test in an interview, right? In some cases, A/B tests aren't applicable. So if you want to measure how many people are using a tab that doesn't exist in an A/B test, it's not going to work because some of the people just can't use the tab. But you can think about the conversion of the percent of people or the number of people out of your daily population that are booking, out of your daily active users that are booking an appointment, right? Abby, you have a question?
Hi, sorry, I was on my Mac and I can't figure out how to unmute myself.
No worries.
I want to just follow up when you mentioned that if you were the interviewer, you were actually to drill down on sorry, I forgot which section that you were mentioned that you were going to drill
on the prioritization of the solutions. Wait.
Yes, I would just love to hear some maybe example questions that you would ask in an interview section.
Well, users will, you know how I was a bit hand wavy in some of my prioritizations beforehand? If I felt like the candidate was very hand wavy and they just told me this is the solution, but they didn't tell me that they applied the framework to it, then I would ask them. And I would probably criticize myself here as well, but maybe I should have brought the metrics that I want to think about earlier, but you know, these are more specific to the feature as well. But my hypothesis is, if I'm thinking about the impact measurement that I have, is my hypothesis was sorry, I lost my thing. This is the problem that I want to solve, right? I want to find a trusted provider who connects well with both me and my child. Then a solution that I have should help people find that provider. So I can say the way I would measure it is how many people are booking a healthcare session. And if I can, like, how many people who are new parents are using this feature to the extent that I can. So maybe it's a proxy to pediatricians, right? So that will be the I in my impact. And then the reach will be how many people I reach or how many posts I am able to reach, because some of this applies to the posts and some of this applies to the people. Confidence. Think about this as an experiment for a second in an experiment in an A/B test, right? You have the delta and you have the confidence interval. So how confident you are that the solution is actually going to be impactful. And then the effort is how much engineering power or how much marketing power or how much effort do you need to bring it, right? So you need to be able to explain to me for each of these why you give that the score that you give it, and compare it to other things. Because we're comparing now different solutions for the same problem. And because this is also like, I'm roughly saying that a complete solution should address a metric that is able to show that you found a trusted provider who connects well with both you and your child. Does that answer your question? I think I spoke a bit quickly.
Yes, I just have a short follow-up with this.
Yes.
For example, in terms of explaining your prioritizations, maybe it's estimating a market size or engineering effort. I'm curious for this, is there a right or wrong for this? Because I understand for solution, maybe there's creative,
There isn't a right or wrong. And also you won't be able to have a full market sizing exercise here. You're at the last 5 minutes of your interviews here.
So as long as I feel like it can be justified, then it should be okay.
Yes.
Okay.
If an interviewer wants you to, I think an interviewer who would want you to do a proper market sizing exercise here, if they agreed with you all along the way until this point, if this is where they want you to do that sizing exercise, then I think they're a bit of a mean interviewer, because there isn't much time for this right now.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Like doing proper market sizing in an interview, and like if you do this in for consulting interviews outside of this is usually a question that you get for consulting interviews when you're out of college, right? And it can take 30 minutes to do a market sizing exercise. So I don't think an interviewer would want you to do it, but then you need to be able to explain. So I'm saying a dedicated tab. Part of what I'm saying, my assumption here is I saw on the app that they have these like dedicated tabs front and center. The fact that they have multiple of them tells me that it was successful for them to put those tabs in it. So therefore they have enough reach. And I'm also baking in an assumption here. If the interviewer wants to be mean and they want you to say what percentage of users how would I validate it? I would probably tell them, I would look at what percentage of users use these tabs and how each tab is getting used more or less, or how the usage of the app changes when you introduce another tab. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
It's okay to explain how you would do it. I wouldn't expect them to ask you to actually come up with a number.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, Joseph.
One more quick question. So to save time, is it acceptable to say, hey, trust and connects well with my child, reach looks pretty low, I'm going to just say these are off the table? And then
that actually shows that you're able to move through with things quickly. So I think it's very okay. I think for me, if I at least see 2 of these, then I'm fine. And I'm also not very adamant about this always. As I mentioned, if the candidates showed me that they're very good with prioritization earlier, in many cases, the candidates don't get to a point where they do all of this. And I've still passed candidates that didn't get to this point. Why? Because I had enough signals beforehand. If they did very, very well, but just for whatever reason, time management was a bit slow or whatever, whatever it is, they were a bit nervous and they didn't fully do this, I'm not necessarily going to say no. Okay, I can tell you that in the same meta interview example that I gave beforehand, when I was going to tell the interviewer how I was going to measure success, the interviewer told me, that's what you have your product execution interview for. That was the first thing he told me in that interview. So some interviewers will tell you, hey, that's for product execution. It's not even for this. But I'm trying to be comprehensive because Meta is not the only place where you're interviewing at, right? So, okay. So these are the key metrics I would track. I want to put a little word about A/B tests, because I think in the example here, I was going to write an A/B test, and then I was going to put the number of DAUs that were using the tab. And then I realized that you can't use an A/B test for. You can't always use A/B tests to measure success. Be careful. When you're using an A/B test, you need to make sure that the metrics in your A group you can track in your B group. And interviewers who aren't very nice might nitpick on you. Sometimes the right tests to run are network tests, which is mostly applicable maybe to social media, or like when you have authors and people who can see the content, and the people who create the content. If you create something that goes on the content, then what does the viewer see? Let's say, I'll give you a good example. The reactions feature for Facebook. Do you know what reactions are? How would you run an A/B test on reactions? What does the user see? Does the user see some posts with reactions and some posts without reactions? What does the author see? Does the author see, like, if a user got a like, but they didn't have other things to show them, then is that counting as a like? It's a bit of a weird experience. It's not a very clean way to test. So A/B tests aren't always the right way to do it. I don't think you will get into this, especially in a product sense interview. But I've just seen that in many cases, and especially in product executions, when candidates told me I would run an A/B test and I I dug deep with them, it felt like they didn't fully understand what it means. So I think it's okay to start saying tracking, and then people will ask you, how do you measure it? But also think about when you're doing, especially in marketplace example or like multiple dimensions, A/B tests can get tricky. So be careful with that. We're starting to lose people, so I'm going to switch to debrief. What did we do today? We spoke about the key aspects of the product sense interview. We spoke about what we're looking to measure. We walked through an imperfect example of a step-by-step flow. When I say imperfect, the example is imperfect, my flow is imperfect. I could be convinced that there are different ways. And as you saw, when you asked me questions, I was like, yeah, you can probably do it that way. I'm trying not to be rigid in my approach, because the most important thing to me is that you guys can implement it and do something that works for you, but understand the foundations for it. That's more important to me, of whether you measure it up front or measure it at the end, as long as you find a place where it's clear that you're thinking about these things. Think about how to manage time, think about common pitfalls. I think we broke a few myths here, that you need to be extremely creative, or that you must use the RICE framework in every step. And I hope it gave you some confidence and understanding the intention and the mindset to come with to this interview for. Okay, now, thank you so much for spending the last 2 hours with me. Thank you. Wanted to see if there are any other questions about product sense, any other questions as well. Let me know what's top of mind for those of you stuck around this far.